Hi, I'm Rochelle Gentile, president of the Dubuque Symphony Orchestra League. I'm here at the Dubuque Golf and Country Club, kicking off our virtual Soundbite series. Under normal circumstances, you'd be right here with me, enjoying a great lunch and a preview of the DSO's upcoming concert, and I'm sure you will be again soon. As you may know, the DSOL develops and administers projects, programs, and events that provide music education opportunities to folks of all ages, as well as financial support to the DSO and its youth ensemble programs. Each year, the League contributes support to youth education events and programs such as the 3rd and 5th grade Arts Trek concerts, the 4th grade Adopt a Musician program, the Youth Concerto competition, the Dubuque Symphony Youth Ensembles, and the Summer String Camp. Along with our many other endeavors is our Senior Classics program, now in its 9th year, providing performances by DSO musicians to entertain residents and their families at local nursing homes and assisted living centers. While the past year has looked a little different, we continue to focus our efforts on fundraising. We encourage and welcome you to join us in our 54th year of supporting the DSO. Please check out the DSO's website for more information about how you can get involved. We hope to see you soon, but before I go, I'd like to introduce our esteemed music director and conductor, Dr. William Intriligator.
Thank you, Rochelle, and welcome everyone. I'm excited to talk to you about the Symphony No. 1 by Joseph Bologne, the Chevalier de Saint-Georges. By who? Well, this is a composer who we should all know more. His life was incredible. What a fascinating life he led, and his music is gorgeous. This is the first classical composer of African descent. I should say the first known established composer of the classical tradition of African descent. He was born in Guadeloupe in the Caribbean, the son of a plantation owner and that plantation owner's black slave. That plantation owner was married, but he had a child with his black slave, and of course this type of thing was unfortunately not uncommon. What was uncommon was that his father, Georges Saint-Georges, really adopted him fully and took the young Joseph Bologne at age 7, I think, or 8, to Paris for a real formal education and to give him everything that he could possibly have to get ahead in life. Treated him like his only son. And so the young Saint-Georges grew up in basically high society in Paris. Was very well read, very scholarly. He was a champion athlete, and he was obviously very well trained in music. He was a fantastic violinist. He went on to be a conductor and a composer. He taught music to Marie Antoinette and became a sort of a friend of Marie Antoinette's. Even after the tutelage stopped, she would sometimes go to his concerts. He became the leader of this orchestra of the one of the finest orchestras in Paris at that time. First, he would join them as violinist and then soloist, and then became their main conductor. He wrote 2 symphonies and several other symphonies concertantes. He wrote operas, he wrote string quartets, and many other great pieces. But the story of his life is just so fascinating because he was extremely handsome, and he apparently was quite a regular in the court, and the women in King Louis's court just fell over for him. He was also, in addition to being a great musician and athlete, he was probably the greatest swordsman in all of Europe at the time. He was a championship swordsman. He was also an incredible marksman. The future U.S. President John Adams, when he was then ambassador to France, he was in Paris and he got to know Saint-Georges, and he said, "You'll never find a better shot." He could hit a waistcoat button, any specific button from a distance. You can throw a button in the air and he'll hit it with a gun. And so these are the kinds of things that, the people he knew and the life that he led was fascinating. And he was granted a knighthood by the king, and that's why he's known as the Chevalier. And He lived from 1745 to 1799. So now his music is actually a lot more like Haydn than you might say Mozart. He was a contemporary of Mozart, and he knew Mozart. When Mozart visited Paris, they were friendly with each other, even though Saint-Georges was of a generation older, perhaps. There's even some speculation that they shared an apartment for a brief time, he and Mozart, which is fascinating. There really has to be a PBS-like masterpiece special done on Saint-Georges. I'd love to see that. In fact, maybe our friend Gareth Johnson could play him. I don't know. That would be amazing. Anyway, I'm very enthusiastic about Saint-Georges, equally about his music as I am about his life. I'm just so intrigued by it. I love reading about it. Go online and read the Wikipedia article. You just won't believe the things that he did. For instance, even though he was granted a knighthood by the king, when the French Revolution really happened in full swing, he sort of took sides with the revolutionary. He actually was put in charge of an entire battalion of all soldiers of African descent. They were known as the Battalion Saint-Georges in his honor. Among the people in that battalion, actually a colonel in that battalion, or general perhaps, was Alexandre Dumas' father. And it's said that the young Alexandre Dumas, the future author of The Three Musketeers, among others, got to see Saint-Georges teach sword fighting to his dad, and that perhaps Saint-Georges was the inspiration for the character Aramis in The Three Musketeers. I'm not making this up. You can actually read about this, but let's get into the music. Let me play you a little bit of this charming Symphony No. 1 that the Dubuque Symphony Orchestra is going to perform. Here's the way it opens. Scored for just strings, 2 oboes, and 2 horns. It's really right in that classical era. The style, the elegance, the gallantness of it. A freshness to it, doesn't it? Saint-Georges was sometimes called in Paris at that time Le Mozart Noir, the Black Mozart. Well, in a way, his music is a little bit more like Haydn, but it is distinctively Saint-Georges. Isn't that lovely? It just makes me smile. And one of the things that's also fascinating about it is that the music is actually challenging to perform. It has to sparkle, and everybody has to be just really locked in together. The musicians really have to, really have their attention, to pay a ton of attention to just play it just right. And it makes me think that the orchestra that he conducted and soloed with, that Orchestra de Amateurs, it wasn't an amateur orchestra. They were professionals, although the name is the Musicians of Amateurs. They must have been fantastic. And they must have, to be able to perform this highly, difficult music and make it sound fresh and easy. Here's a little bit of the second movement. There are 3 movements, not the 4 that you might expect from later symphonies. But here is a little bit of the second movement, the slow movement. The subtle turns of direction in the melody make it seem like, okay, this could have been Haydn, but it's not. This is has its own distinctive taste and its own style. This piece was written in 1779. Imagine what was happening in our country then. Imagine what was going to happen in France with the Revolution in just a few years. Saint-Georges was 34 when he wrote this. Gorgeous. So wonderful. I'll play you a little bit of the final movement, the third movement. And I will mention also that it's unfortunate that after the Revolution, even though he distinguished himself and helped with his troops, won a big battle in Lille, he was in prison for a full year. He just was hoping to like get his violin or write music or something, but he spent a full year in prison even though he was on the side of the rebellion. And then he emerged after that, and I think he went to try to run the family plantation back in the Caribbean. I think the first time he went back there since he had been left when he was about 7. And his life is just so fascinating. Again, here's the third movement, the Allegro Assai. It has a nice lilting rhythm. That is hard. It's so intriguing. His life must have been amazing. And he must have just been so incredibly talented. To be able to be this level of composer, which is really saying something, and concert violinist. I mean, many of his pieces that he wrote are essentially like violin concertos that he wrote for himself. And then also to be like the greatest marksman and swordsman in all of Europe at the time, too. Fascinating. Fascinating. The people he knew, who he interacted with, from Mozart to John Adams, Marie Antoinette, so many others. What a life. I highly encourage you to keep listening to more of Saint-Georges' music. And I'm excited to keep performing more of it. It's so wonderful. Thank you for listening.